Are you ready? Are you ready? It's now time for another one of Mr. Owen's Lectures. This is a special edition. Viva Mexico! That's right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Mexico. We are going to do the history of Mexico in about 10 minutes. Are you ready to get down with the green, the white, and the red? Take a look at their flag. I personally think Mexico has one of the coolest flags on the planet. So cool. So cool. So you're probably wondering, why, Mr. Owen, are we learning about Mexico? Well, I'll tell you why. Because less than 200 years ago, the area that you live in today was actually a part of Mexico. Yes, San Diego, named after Saint Diego, was a part of Mexico, a former colony of Spain. Escondido is a Spanish word, and the cultural and heritage that you have in this area comes from Mexico. It comes from Spanish heritage. We are only an hour's drive from Mexico. It's important that you know your heritage, you know the culture around you. That's why we're learning about Mexico. If we were living in Seattle and I was teaching you about history in Seattle, I would cover Chinese history extensively because Seattle has a huge Chinese presence. But we live in San Diego and we have a huge Mexican presence, and it's important that you understand the culture and where that comes from. Okay? We started out with the French Revolution. You saw that the French Revolution led to nationalism. Nationalism led to growth, which led to competition, which led to the Industrial Revolution, which then led to imperialism. This has nothing to do with that. So we're going to take a pause for the cause, and we're going to learn about Mexico just so you have a better understanding of the city that you live in. All right, so let's do it. So before the Industrial Revolution, before imperialism, you had a thing called the Columbian Exchange. This is where Columbus is going to discover the Americas. You've probably heard the poem. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. He said to the Indians, "Hi, I see ya." And Columbus is going to get credit for discovering the Americas. Now, he was not the first person to discover it. The Vikings did it. There's evidence that Polynesians might have done it. There's evidence that the Japanese might have done it. But it's significant because Columbus is the only person to actually share it with the rest of the world. So he gets credit. And in 1492, he's going to discover the Americas, and Europe's going to be salivating to see what they can get out of the Americas. And in the Columbian Exchange, goods are exchanged from one continent to the other. For example, horses from Europe are brought over to the Americas, transforming the Americas. Okay, sweet potatoes are brought from the Americas to Europe, which is going to transform Europe and Asia and give them a different food item. So those are some examples. You also have slaves from Africa being brought into the Americas, which is going to change the Americas and going to change Africa. So those are some examples of the Columbian Exchange. Well, as Europe starts to go into the Americas, and again, like we saw in Africa, divided up like a pie, before Africa, they had the Americas, and they start to fight over this vast land of North and South America. And one of the richest countries on the planet when it comes to resources is Mexico. They have a ton of oil. They have a ton of gold. So Mexico is filled with gold, and there's going to be this guy named Hernan Cortez, and he is going to go into Mexico. He's a Spaniard. He's what's called a conquistador, and he is going to walk into this city called Tenochtitlan, which is this huge Aztec megacity, and it's just gold everywhere. And Hernan Cortez's eyes are going to light up, and he is going to come up with a plan that eventually leads to the Aztecs getting killed, and him taking over, and him getting all this gold and sending it back to Spain, making Spain super rich, and making Mexico a colony of Spain. And Mexico is going to be a colony of Spain for about 300 years. And Spain is going to run them, and that's how it's going to go. And the colonial rule that Spain implements into Mexico is going to really limit their growth. So basically, they'd have one guy who would own most of the land, and all of the people on the land would work for hardly any money, and they would get hardly any items or food, and then the rich would get richer and the poor would get poorer. This was a really bad situation, but it was how the colonial rule ran Mexico. It's going to really limit the growth. In the early 1800s, Mexico, the people of Mexico had had enough of Spain's rule. They had seen what happened with the United States revolting. They had seen what happened with Haiti revolting. They had seen what happened in France with them revolting, and they decided to declare independence. And there's this famous priest named Miguel Hidalgo. How do you spell it? It's right here, Miguel Hidalgo. And Miguel Hidalgo is a priest, and he's going to give this famous speech called the Viva Mexico speech. And he's going to declare independence from Spain in 1810. And in 1811, the Spanish will execute Miguel Hidalgo, this priest. Oh, and that's going to really infuriate Mexico. And they're going to fight the Mexican War of Independence against Spain from 1810 to September 27th, 1821. So for 11 years, they battle Spain, and they finally win, and they kick Spain out. Happy days, right? Not so much. This guy named General Santa Anna is going to take over, and he is, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, the president of Mexico, but he's really more of a dictator. And the colonial rule that Spain had ran Mexico with is going to stay implemented in Mexico, and it's going to continue to hinder their growth. So yes, they had their independence, but did really much change? No, not at all. And this guy named Santa Anna, who's this really fancy dressing general, you can see here in the pictures, he is going to get in a war with Texas. Texas at the time was a part of Mexico, and they decide to declare their independence from Mexico. This has nothing to do with the United States. But a lot of people that had lived in the United States who wanted to start over, who wanted to go somewhere new, had moved into Texas. And Texas itself is going to fight a war with Mexico in 1835. This is where the Alamo comes from, and Davy Crockett and Jim Bowie getting killed at the Alamo. And Santa Anna is going to battle him at the Alamo and win. But then this guy named Sam Houston is going to go, and he's going to defeat Santa Anna. And when you are a general that runs a country and you get defeated, you lose. And you lose that territory. So Texas actually becomes its own country. A lot of Americans don't know that. Texans know that. But in 1836, Texas becomes its own country. No joke. Fast forward about another 10 years, and the Mexican-American War is going to take place. Now, Texas had some trouble with their own currency, some issues, so the United States convinces Texas to join them in the fight against Mexico. They'd already fought Mexico 10 years prior. So Texas joins the United States, becomes a part of the United States, and the Mexican-American War begins. And again, Santa Anna is going to get defeated. By 1947, the U.S. Army is going to occupy Mexico City, and they negotiate a deal, and Mexico gives up California, they give up Arizona, they give up New Mexico. They had already lost Texas, and they give up some parts of Nevada and some parts of Utah. And a couple years later, United States is even going to buy some more parts of Mexico, and Santa Anna is going to sell it to them. And in 1857, the Mexicans have had enough of Santa Anna. They lost a huge chunk of their territory, as you can see, and they kick him out of Mexico. Happy days, right? Not so much. In 1861, France invades Mexico, right? If it couldn't get any worse, right? France is going to invade, and they're going to occupy Mexico. You see, Mexico had borrowed money from France to fight their various wars. They didn't pay France back, so France invades Mexico. And they're going to occupy Mexico for a couple years. But in 1867, Benito Juarez is going to expel the French from Mexico, and they are going to again have independence, and he will become president. But again, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, they're really not presidents, they're more dictators. And not long after Juarez, Porfirio Diaz is going to take over, and he's not even going to put the president label on his name. He is a flat-out dictator, and he is going to rule Mexico with an iron fist for 35 years. Okay? And in 1910, you're sensing a theme here. The Mexican people are tired of the way they're being treated, so they're going to have a revolucion, and this is going to be led by Emiliano Zapata and also Pancho Villa, and they're going to have armies that are going to fight, and this is the La Revolución, La Reforma, as it's called in Spanish, and they want reforms, they want change. La Reforma. Okay, and in 1911, Diaz is overthrown. He's kicked out of power, and this guy Francisco Madero takes over. Okay, and you think, yay, happy days? Not so much. After Diaz is ousted, Mexico goes through 3 presidents in 3 years. So Madero will take over. He relies too much on his general, Victorino Huerta, and Victorino Huerta was a terrible guy, and he's going to kick Madero out of power, and then Huerta is going to take over, and he's going to be a totalitarian leader, like a dictator, iron fist kind of a guy, and then he's going to get kicked out, and you're sensing this theme of like just one bad leader after another. So the Mexican people are still not happy. They keep fighting, Pancho Villa keeps fighting, Zapata keeps fighting, and eventually in 1917, Mexico is finally going to get a constitution, which is a huge deal for them. It's what they wanted, it's what they fought after. So again, 1917, they finally get that. A quick recap of that: Porfirio Diaz, 1911, is overthrown after 35 years of dictatorship rule. He's replaced by Madero, who is going to fail after a year, get replaced by Huerta. Huerta's going to fail and get kicked out. But in 1917, Mexico is finally going to get a constitution. So what came with the Mexican Constitution? They got separation of church and state, which was a big deal. Mexico is a very Catholic country, and the Pope had a huge control over that with priests and bishops, and so they wanted separation of church and state. They set minimum wage for workers, which was a huge deal. Workers in Mexico were working for literally next to nothing. They got labor unions, and they got the ability to strike if they weren't happy. And sorry, ladies, this was for men only. So women, you didn't get any rights in this constitution, but it was great for the men, and at least they had a constitution. And it created a lot of nationalism in Mexico. People were really excited, and they're going to finally get some decent leaders in there. And in 1929, the party called the National Mexican Party is going to take over Mexico, and they are going to rule Mexico democratically for 71 years. And in the 1930s, you're going to see a lot of economic growth. In the 1940s, Mexico will join the United States and other allies in World War II, fighting against Hitler and Japan. In 1968, the Summer Olympics are held in Mexico City, and they're seeing some prosperity, and that's really until about the 70s or 80s. In the 1970s and 80s, there's a guy named Pablo Escobar, who is Colombian, and he is a huge drug cartel guy. And he's going to really put drug cartels on the map, and he's going to start selling drugs like cocaine in the United States, and he's going to go through Mexico. He even owns his own submarines. This guy was crazy powerful, crazy rich, and eventually the United States is going to take him out. And in 1993, he's killed in a shootout, but he spent a lot of the 80s in prison. So in this time, when they take out this head honcho drug cartel leader, it's going to open up the competition for other drug cartels. And so today what you see is a lot of corruption within Mexico because of the drug market in the United States. These drug cartels operate out of Mexico. They take drugs from Colombia and other parts of South America, and they bring them through Mexico and into the United States. And it creates a lot of corruption because these drug cartels make a lot of money. They can buy politicians, they can buy police, and it's created a lot of problems within the last 30 to 40 years in Mexico that are still going on today. Some of those cartels are the Sinaloa cartel, the Juarez cartel. You may have seen headlines about a guy named El Chapo Guzman, who's broken out of prison here in the United States a couple of times. Like he is a top drug kingpin that's on trial, that's going to go to jail for a really long time. So Mexico is one of the richest countries in the world. You may not have known that. They have a ton of gold, a ton of oil, a ton of resources, and there's a huge opportunity for prosperity there. But like I said, one of the biggest problems they face today isn't necessarily poor leadership anymore or bad presidents. It's the drug cartels that affect a lot of the day life in certain areas. And you may not see it in areas like Puerto Vallarta. I got my Cancun t-shirt. The tourist areas tend to stay really beautiful and popular, but it's other parts of Mexico, the ones that you don't get to visit, that go through this. But that's Mexico. And you're probably wondering at this point, Mr. Owen, what in the wide world of sports is going on? We have not had a fun fact yet. Fun fact! Time for a fun fact! All right, here is Fun Facts of Mexico, as told to you by Christopher Walken. If you don't know who Christopher Walken is, please go home today and rethink your life. Mexico, wow, what a great lesson, Mr. Owen. You're learning so much in your class. It's crazy, but I love it. Thank you. Did you know Mexico has the world's smallest volcano? It's called Cuauhtémoc, and it's only 43 feet. That's small. It's not even big. It's a mound. It's not even a hill or a mountain. It's called Cuauhtémoc. Here's a picture. Look at it. It's tiny. You could go there and visit. All right, another thing that you should know is Mexicans don't celebrate Cinco de Mayo. That's an American holiday. Americans like to party, so any excuse we use. Cinco de Mayo is the Mexican revolt against France occupying them, and they kicked the French out after a couple years. So that's where that comes from, and the Mexicans really don't celebrate. Mexican Independence Day is September 16th. Crazy, right? That's the day that priest that Mr. Owen told you about declared independence. Crazy. That's where Mexican independence is, against Spain. So stop celebrating Cinco de Mayo. It's not really a holiday in Mexico. Okay, September 16th, Mexican Independence Day. Mark your calendars now. All right, one other fun fact for you, brought to you by Mr. Owen, is the burrito. And the burrito is not really a Mexican thing, it's more of a Tex Mex. And they do eat burritos in northern Mexico, but really it's more of a gringo thing. So, it's not really, a hardcore Mexican food like a taco or an enchilada. But that's all right if you didn't know that. So, all right, I appreciate all the fun facts. Now back to you, Mr. Owen. Thank you, Christopher Walken, for that wonderful fun facts. Yes, burritos really aren't Mexican. It's more of a gringo thing. Tacos are very Mexican. And I love myself a good taco. What's your favorite taco? You got carnitas, you got pollo asada, you got carne asada. Oh, I love a good carnitas taco. And how about burrito? Even though a burrito is more of a Tex-Mex thing, it's become a huge part of our culture here in San Diego. You're not going to find a Mexican restaurant in San Diego that doesn't have a burrito. I love a California burrito. I realize that's like the ultimate gringo burrito, but I love it. Steak, french fries, wrapped up with sour cream. Come on, people. If you haven't tried it, please, please, please go this weekend. Try a California burrito. Tell your parents or your guardians that Mr. Owen gave it to you as homework. It's delicious. Some other burritos that are delicious: machaca, carnitas, carne asada, bean and cheese. What's your favorite burrito? Mine's California. You're entitled to your opinions. They're all yummy. I absolutely love Mexican food. I love living in San Diego. I love the culture that we have here. It's absolutely beautiful. Hopefully you've learned a little bit. The Mexican culture is one that I absolutely love. They are very family oriented. You go to a park in San Diego on Sundays and you're going to see a lot of Mexican families out there barbecuing, playing. You're going to see piñatas because family in Mexico comes first. And so even though Mexico's had struggles in their independence and in their freedoms, they don't always care because they care about their family. And as long as they can feed their family and spend time with their family, that's what's important. And to me, that's a really, really beautiful thing. And so I love living in San Diego. Not only is the weather amazing, but our culture, our heritage, and the fact that we come from a beautiful country with a beautiful culture that was Mexico. So I'm honored to be here. I hope you learned today. And with that said, Viva Mexico!